Hi, I'm Tom Field, Senior Vice President of Editorial with Information Security Media Group. I'm talking today about cybercrime trends in 2017. And it's my pleasure to be speaking with Steve Durbin. He's the Managing Director of the Information Security Forum. Steve, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, pleasure, Tom. Good to see you.
Now, we were talking a few minutes before we sat down here. You've been back and forth between the U.S. and the U.K. more times than I can count this year. What are some of the key cybercrime trends that you're particularly paying attention to?
Yeah, good question. I mean, cybercrime, it continues to mature. It continues to become a really evolving threat for most organizations. And I think that certainly if we look at the ISF membership around the world, probably about a third of those are in the financial services space. So we get good insight into some of those key challenges for the financial services guys. I think, though, one of the more worrying trends that it is transitioning into some of the other vertical sectors, retail, for instance. I mean, just here this morning we're listening to a keynote about Target and so on. And cybercrime, I think, is becoming a concern for pretty much every vertical sector because of this maturation process that is going through. And their ability to exfiltrate information and then monetize that has really changed the landscape quite a bit. And that's obviously of concern to all of our members.
Now, you've got membership all over the world right now. As you travel and visit with members, where do you see some of the more common vulnerabilities to threats such as ransomware and IoT-powered botnets, everything else that we're seeing in the landscape?
Yeah, I think what I would say is that there is no geographic focus on all of this kind of thing, Tom. One of the realities of cyber is that it is a global issue. And therein lies the problem, because we do not have jurisdictional authority globally. So the good guys can't go and chase down the bad guys irrespective of where they happen to be. That's a big issue for law enforcement. I think, though, again, back to my point about maturation, ransomware is a great one to pick up on. One of the things I'm going to be talking about later on is the move towards having ransomware targeting IoT devices. Right. Mainly because that gives you such a bigger landscape to go after from the bad guy's standpoint. And that's a real concern. Why? Because it also opens up the whole consumer space. IoT devices are now prevalent not just in business, but also in the home. And they're accessing all sorts of interesting information from a cybercriminal standpoint. And that's the real concern, I think, as we go forward. How do we nail that one? How do we ring fence that? How do we raise the level of awareness at the consumer level that we have to be protecting these devices in the home? And they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, as you know.
Well, the awareness level is one thing for consumers and even for businesses. What can we do to affect change with manufacturers?
Yeah, manufacturers, I think, have a good opportunity here. The standardization. If we look at IoT, certainly just a number of years ago, there was no standardization. That is a double-edged sword, frankly. The fact that there wasn't standardization made it much more difficult for the bad guys to get access because there are different operating systems, different ways that you need to get in. So you need a really good understanding of the device. Of course, as it matures, what we're starting to see is standards evolving, commonality, which is opening up some of the opportunities. And so the onus is very much more on the manufacturer to really preserve the integrity of that device. And here's the rub, that comes at a cost. Are we prepared to bear that cost is the response that the manufacturers will be putting forward, because they will go so far as to protect their reputation, their brand, and to make sure that the device continues to work. After that, different story.
Good big question to answer in the coming months.
Huge.
Talk to me about the Information Security Forum. What's the mission of the organization?
Well, it's an interesting one. The mission hasn't really changed. We've been around now for 29 years. You imagine what the whole industry was like then. I can't even remember. So the founding principles were that by combining knowledge of all of the members around the world, and a lot of them are from the Fortune and the Forbes, the multinationals, the global powerhouses. By combining all of that information, making it available to the rest of the members, sharing it, the membership would be collectively in a much better position to be able to deal with some of the challenges that we've just been talking about.
Right. What are some of the things that you are actively doing for your membership?
Well, we're certainly having to consider things like regulation, the way that that's evolving. I'm spending a lot of time in New York at the moment. The DFS regulation that's come out there is really looking at the way in which financial services organizations behave. That's a big issue for our membership. The General Data Protection Regulation in the European Union That's a big issue for our membership. That is raising the bar considerably in terms of the level of protection that needs to be in place around personally identifiable information. And I think a lot of organizations are still struggling to come to terms with what that actually means for them. So on the regulatory side, there's certainly that. We've touched on this whole issue of awareness. That's a key one. Never going to go away. If anyone wants to start a business, awareness is where it's at. Always has been, always will be.
It's always a challenge.
Always. And then we get into really how do we anticipate threats so that we're much better placed to deal with them should they ever occur and hit our businesses. So those are pretty much the sorts of things that we're occupying ourselves with at the moment.
Where are your biggest areas of growth?
Well, certainly the membership continues to be very, very healthy here in the United States and of course in Europe. We've introduced, probably about 18 months ago now, consultancy services to our members to really help them to implement some of the things that we're talking about, and that is going exceptionally well. There's clearly demand out there for that.
Demand is not going away anytime soon.
Absolutely not.
Steve,
no.
I appreciate your time and insight today. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, Tom.
Been talking about the Information Security Forum. I've been speaking with its managing director, Steve Durbin. For Information Security Media Group, I'm Tom Field. Thank you very much.